Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, friends and the foes out there, and welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussain. Before I introduce today's guest, I'm going to remind all the avid podcast listeners that you can find this episode and all 4 seasons on all the major audio platforms. And if you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be cheeky, do remember to click subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel. Today's guest is really an interesting and exciting one. I'm in South Africa, in Cape Town as we speak. He actually requires no introduction, but I will give him just a brief one. He is a world-renowned and internationally respected businessman. He also happens to be the father of one of the most wealthiest and influential men on earth, and that's none other than Errol Musk. Errol, welcome to the Blood Brothers podcast. Thank you for having me, and apologies for inconveniencing you. I know this podcast has been in the making since before Ramadan. So thank you very much and welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. And, it's fine. We got there. That's the most important thing.
We did indeed. I know you suggested to do it online, but I thought since I'm in South Africa, I think people appreciate in-person interactions.
Yes, obviously.
I mean, let's kick it off for our viewers and listeners who don't know about Errol Musk, his family, his background. How long has the Musk family been in South Africa?
Well, the Musk family has been in South Africa since, I'd say, on the grandfather's side since 1900, but on the grandmother's side since the 1600s.
Tell us a bit more about the 1600s part. Is it English? Is it Dutch? What's
the French?
French,
yes.
Okay.
So on that side, it's the French side of the family. They first came with the Huguenots in 1693. So so we are part of the Huguenot French. Of course, we've interbred and, families all over the show now. But we were Theron, same as Charlize Theron, the actress,
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the family trade? What were your forefathers involved in?
Farming.
Farming?
Yes, all farming.
So when Mr. Malema talks about killing the Boers and farmers, would you constitute within that?
I'd like him to say that to me in front of me, and then I can deal with him,
Off. Yeah. Do you have any farmland in South Africa?
I don't have any more. I used to farm tomatoes on a large scale.
Okay.
I'm actually a consulting engineer, but I farmed as well, and I did tomatoes, and it was an interesting line of work.
In which country did you spend most of your childhood years?
Well, I was born in South Africa, spent most of my time in the refugee area of Johannesburg at the time, Hillbrow. My mother was a refugee from England. My father had been born here. He'd just come out of the military when I was born. He was in the war the whole time. And so we wound up in the very poorest of the poor area of Johannesburg at the time, Hillbrow, where all the refugees lived. Usually couples were living in one room, and we actually had 2 rooms. So my parents were quite better off, We had 2 rooms. The one was their bedroom, the other one was a lounge. I slept on a couch until I was 10 years old. I didn't even have a bedroom. And but it was interesting because I was able to meet all the, be there when all the refugees came to visit in my parents' lounge. So they came from all over the world, and it was very interesting to listen to them talking as a little boy. I'd lie under the table with my blanket and pillow and listen to them going on into the night and crying and shouting and laughing and so on. And then at 10 years of age, my father was severely hampered after the war. He suffered from terrible shaking. He never got over the war damage that did to him. He was in cyber warfare, and he went all the way from South Africa as a 19-year-old boy all the way up into Germany.
Wow.
And saw some terrible things. And my mom had sort of had enough of it at a certain point, and she decided to take us back to England, my brother and myself. And so we left South Africa and left my father, and we went to stay in England for 2 years.
Were your maternal side were in England?
My maternal
Family?
my mother's family were all in England.
Okay.
Yes.
From where in England?
Liverpool and all over, from Gloucester and Liverpool and Bristol and also in Lincolnshire, you know, Bury St Edmunds, no, that's my father's side. All more on the west side, Gloucester.
Sure.
You know.
And regarding your father, did he ever because people are of a certain generation, right? And I'm assuming those post-World War I, post-World War II, there wasn't such thing as trauma therapy. You know, men weren't as expressive as they were about the things that they go through. Did your father ever explain to you or your mother about what it is that he experienced during his time in Germany?
No. He was subject to the Official Secrets Act. So it was only in 1975 that I was told what he did. There was a 30-year period during which he wasn't allowed to mention what he did in the war. So only in 1975 did I hear what he did, what he was involved in.
What was that?
Cyber warfare.
But what type of things did he see as a result of that position?
Well, you know, I can't say what he saw. I know that he saw some of his colleagues being, I don't know if he saw them, but they were caught and executed.
By the Germans?
By the Italians.
Oh, by the Italians?
Yes.
Okay.
And then he, you know, I heard the stories secondhand from my mother. But we didn't push him, you know, we didn't want to make a misery out of his life. He couldn't stop shaking, you know, all his life. If you could hear him coming if he had any coins in his pockets, because if he had his hand in his pocket, you could hear him coming from quite a way. Chickle, 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 chickle.
And was he a kind of a soft man, or was he a man of temperament?
Very soft.
Very soft, yeah?
He was very good with crosswords. That's why they got him into the cyber warfare.
Okay.
He was very, very good. He could do even then, you know, when I was a kid, he could do the Sunday Times crossword in about 10 minutes. So he would submit it in, and he won it at least twice. And the prize was 10 rands or £5, which was a massive amount of money at the time. You know, it was like huge amount of money in the 50s, you know, to get £5. And he won it twice, at least twice.
And how
Elon has spoken about my father, his grandfather's ability with crosswords. It was quite amazing to watch him do a crossword.
Are you good at crosswords?
No, I don't do them at all.
How was your relationship with your father?
It was okay, you know. I mean, we, you know, he did his thing, I did my thing. He occasionally would issue me with some sort of dire warning about if I do, you know, I got early on into business. And as a consulting engineer, I was in business and property development and taking out loans and all this sort of stuff. And my father would occasionally warn me, you know, and say, you've got to be careful because you're going to lose everything, you know, because he was frightened of everything, you know. And I would say, no, well, we are careful. Yes, but these people that you're dealing with, they're no good. I can see it. You know, that kind of thing.
Sure.
He was very, very, very scared sort of person.
Risk averse.
Well, you know, circumstances had made him pretty risk averse, yeah.
Do you have siblings?
I have a brother, he's a medical specialist.
Older or younger?
Younger.
What's the age gap?
6 years.
You in communication with him? You have a relationship with him?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Nice. Let's move a bit towards the apartheid era of South Africa. How was life throughout the 60s and 70s and 80s and early 90s? Were you in South Africa?
Yes, I was in South Africa. When we lived in Hillbrow, for the first 10 years of my life, I had no inkling about apartheid. It didn't have any effect whatsoever on me or my life or anything like that. I never saw anything to do with apartheid. I had no idea, you know, nothing at all. I mean, what was there? I mean, in fact, talking about the friends I had there, they were actually oddly enough, an Indian family that had a Hindu family, you know. They were Hindus. I'm sure they're Hindus. In that respect, I don't recall any kind of apartheid of any kind. They joined us. We went, played together, everything. So I can't recall any problem of any kind. Then I went to England, where it was a bit different, because England, I found, was a place, unlike South Africa, where children were actually loved. It was amazing, because in South Africa, it was a very strict situation in South Africa. So if you were at school in South Africa, you know, I was the top of the class throughout my school, but I was caned quite often for the least infraction. And the caning was terrible. It left red railway marks on your backside for 2 or 3 days.
Oh dear.
And this happened all the time. And you know, you got the feeling as a kid, you know, you weren't that popular. But at any rate, when we went to, when my mum took us to England, I found a totally different culture, where they actually liked children. They actually loved children. And everything seemed to be set up for children in England. And so, yeah, it was very nice to be in England. It opened my eyes. You know, every Friday, we'd go for a threepence worth of £1/4 of sweets with threepence at Bridges, the corner shop, and he'd had all our little packets ready. It was like just one of those things, you know, in the walls, ice cream, and people were so kind in England. It was a real eye-opener for me to spend 2 years in England.
What was your first business venture?
My first business venture? Well, you know, to get by as a scholar, as a schoolboy, I went to places when I was in grade 8, when I was 13 years old, told them I'm 15, so that I could get a job on Saturday mornings or Friday afternoons, helping them with whatever they wanted, you know, packing out or whatever. So I managed to get that done. And so I found myself throughout my high school and university doing these extra jobs, and eventually getting quite far along with these type of businesses, you know, actually purchasing for them eventually, you know, and doing the inventories and all sorts of things for some of these big retailers. And yeah, my first business venture was really, I did a degree in engineering, and immediately after that realized that it came to my realization that engineers don't actually earn very much money, and that worried me. And I had grown up very, you know, without money, you know, and I had friends through university and school and everything who came from wealthy homes, and I didn't want to have that. I wanted to get out of that. So I started studying law with the idea that maybe that will help. And I articled to a law firm, and I hadn't been. And they articled me to the main partner of the biggest law firm in South Africa, and they treated me incredibly well. And about 9 months into that job, I got a call from a friend of mine who was working for consulting engineers from England, and he wanted to leave them. He had been at university with me, and he wanted to leave them and go and work for the Armaments Board at the time. And so I left the attorneys, much to their disgust. They were very unhappy that I left. They told me I'm making a big mistake. I would eventually become head of the firm and all that sort of thing. But I left to go and work for consulting engineers. And I joined this firm of consulting engineers as an article clerk with a degree, professional article clerk or professional assistant. I had a carpeted office, a desk, a dictaphone, a secretary, everything. I wore a suit every day to work. Then I went to work for the engineers, and it was parquet, dirty parquet flooring, iron tables, iron desks, iron everything, you know, mess everywhere, drawings all over the show, quite the opposite. And I liked it. I liked what I was doing. And then within a month or two, I was told that I can't cash my check.
Why?
Because, well, I didn't know either at the time. That was also my question, why? I didn't know that businesses don't have money sometimes.
Okay.
So it didn't occur to me what they mean, but it turned out that this particular British firm had done a very poor job of work for the South African government, Public Works Department, and mainly because they regarded South Africa as a second-class place. The Brits that came here, they were big shots from Britain, and they regarded South Africans, white South Africans, as second class, and treated you as second class. And they treated the work that they had here as a second rate. Mm-hmm. They were, in fact, they were the same firm doing the Sydney Opera House. So they were a big firm. But South Africa for them was not that important, if you know what I mean. So anyway, they decided they're going to leave the country instead of face legal action. So they closed the office down. And then there was an older man, maybe 10, 12 years older than me. I was only about 23. And he came to me and he said, well, he and I should take over the practice, offered to buy the practice from them, which consists of a reference library, which is the main thing, you see, which you use as engineers. So I said, wow, that's amazing. Yes. Anyway, we did it. And so we took over this office, and I did very well in this kind of work. Within a few months, maybe a year, less than a year, the older man said to me he wants to leave because he couldn't take the situation that you don't get regular pay. He had a wife and family, and he wanted to take a job with, as it happened, the uranium enrichment company in South Africa. And he left, and I went on my own, and never looked back, So
does that mean you've got 2 degrees, one in engineering and one in law?
No, I never completed a law degree, but I did complete a degree in mechanical engineering.
Okay.
So I did electrical and mechanical.
What university did you go to?
I went to Wits University and Pretoria University.
Now, on Pretoria, when did you start getting involved in politics? I know you were a city council member between 1972 and 1983.
Yes, I at the time, I didn't really know how things worked, but I became interested in the circumstances in the city, such as poor street lighting and things like that. And I wanted to know who's responsible for that sort of thing at the time. And they told me, well, it's the council. And I started learning, went on a quick learning curve. And then they said, if you want to do anything about it, you need to be a city councillor. So I said, okay, I'll stand to be a city councillor. I stood against a behemoth, or whatever it is, of the National Party. That was the South African Dutch Afrikaans Party that controlled everything. And as it happened then, I was elected with a landslide, and I was the first English-speaking city councillor for about 30 years, in the council.
The dynamics between the Afrikaans, who kind of trace their lineage back to the Dutch, am I correct?
Yes.
And then there's English South Africans.
Yes.
Was there friction between the two, or did you not see each other as European Caucasian cousins?
Oh, no. The two European, South Africa's that's a lot of the reasons for what I was talking about, the harshness in South Africa. South Africa consists of 2 white groups who basically can't stand each other, okay? And then you've got about 11 black groups who can't stand each other either, you see? So it's not difficult to understand this. Black groups, when I say they don't like each other, that means they easily kill each other, if you know what I mean. The white group wouldn't go that far as saying that they would kill each other, but they certainly hate each other. Things have improved. Since we've gone over to a black government, the 2 white groups have been somewhat pushed together.
Okay.
To try and be a group, in opposition, let's say, to the overwhelming sort of black group, if you know what I mean, something like that. So things are better in that respect, but no, I would say that when I arrived as a young boy in South Africa with my mother, after being in England for 2 years, I was immediately attacked. My mom, the reason we came back, by the way, we came back after 2 years. My father, to his credit, placed a bet on a horse with some money he had, and the horse came in. It was some outsider, and he won something like, I'm not sure if it was £3,500 or £5,500.
It's a lot of money for that.
But it was an enormous amount of money. It was enough to buy a house. And so my mother immediately came straight back to South Africa before he squandered that money, and we bought a house. And they carried on for the rest of their lives, my mom and dad.
So when your mom went back to England, they hadn't divorced?
No.
Okay, it was just for living standards or quality of life.
Just you can't explain what people do. People leave each other. People stay together, then they leave. Then they, at the moment the divorce rate in the world is 70%. But in those days, divorce was almost unheard of. So getting a divorce was almost unheard of in those days. She simply went back to England. She didn't intend marrying anybody else. Okay. And so we came back to South Africa. We bought a house, and within the first few days, we were attacked, and mud and rocks and things were thrown at our house
by who?
The South African Dutch crowd, you see. Okay. And told we must leave, we must go, we're not wanted, all that kind of thing. So that was our introduction to coming back to South Africa.
Now, earlier on, when you said, look, growing up you didn't see apartheid, you had Indian friends, but there must have been some point where you must have at least observed that there was some differences and some segregation or clear segregation. At what point did you...
Well, as a child, when I say child, up to the age of, 15 or something, like 14 or so, the only thing I would say about that apartheid would have benefited, well, I saw it must have been a benefit. We had very good law and order in the country. So we had no, you could go anywhere you liked. You could, kids could go anywhere they liked. There was no restriction on being alone or going alone in a train and stuff like that. Elon, when he was 9 years old, came up on a train from Durban to Johannesburg, all on his own overnight. He was 9. That was 81, I'd say, 1981. There was there was a very good law and order. Police force was very effective. And, so I would say that the country was very much better off in that regard. At that age, I wasn't aware of people, we'd never seen begging or anything like that, because there were no beggars.
Did you see black people?
Sure, we saw a lot of black people, but everybody seemed to be employed. So there was no, we didn't know anything about, there was no such thing as homeless people. We didn't have anything like that. And as I got older, when I was 16, 17, one of the things I started taking note of was the Rivonian trials, where the ANC, who we called terrorists at that time, were on trial at the old synagogue in Pretoria. And among those on trial, I remember quite clearly some white men and a black man was Nelson Mandela. So I went to the trial. Now, I couldn't get into the building, but you could hang about outside the building and sort of try and look through the windows and stuff, The crowds were there, And it's an ordinary building. It's an old synagogue, so it's on a piece of ground, so you just can actually get an idea what's going on by just being on the outside of the building. And I remember that. I went to that trial a few times on my bicycle. And the trial I recall not quite fully understanding everything. It was about the killing of people. And as I recall, Mandela had been implicated in bombing, which caused power lines to come down somewhere in Johannesburg, and which had then killed women and children. And he was sentenced to death, you know. Mm. And I recall the people outside the synagogue, the crowd outside, being very relieved that he's going to be hanged. And then it went on a bit, and then the judge came back, and as I recall, I mean, I'm not an expert in recalling this, I just vaguely remember it. Then it was then they came back with a new thing saying that all the people had been commuted to life imprisonment. There'll be no
death sentences.
No death sentences. So after that, I remember the people in the street were crying and saying, no, this is wrong, you know. They were crying about the fact that it was commuted to life imprisonment, you know. And I remember seeing that, and people were very upset about that. Anyway, that was my sort of introduction to what was going on in South Africa. I never really had any great cause to experience apartheid. As I got older and I went to university and stuff, I did realize that blacks were not admitted to the university. Or hang on, they weren't admitted to Pretoria University, but they were admitted to Wits University. So that was my first experience. So when I went to Wits University, I was quite interested to see that there were a lot of black students. And they said, no, blacks are admitted to Wits University. Oh, I said, oh. So I was kind of aware that there's this sort of thing. And then, of course, restaurants, movies, theatres and all that.
Because things were segregated.
Were segregated. We were not, it was whites only.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a young person at that time, you rely on your older generation to lead you. And the story that you got from the older generation was that this was for health reasons. This was for reasons of, you know, health and sanitation or whatever, I don't know. And, you know, it was sad to say in those days, it was not common to shake hands with a black person because, you know, the thought was, well, that's not what you do. That's the honest truth. And if you had a servant at home who started using your knives and forks and cutlery, you would have probably disposed of those knives and forks and cutlery or given them to the maid. So, well, you keep them now, I don't want them anymore.
And that was, would you say, and that was a normalized thing that you were told by your elders?
Yes, as a child, that's what you saw was happening with your elders. And so, you know, that was, then I must say that towards the end of my studies, of my first degree, I did join the National Union of South African Students, which was an anti-apartheid body.
Oh, really?
Yes, they were against apartheid.
No, I'm talking about you joined that. Some might find that a surprise.
I mean, I was learning, and I agreed with their approach. I agreed with what they were saying. Remember, I was only about 18 or 19. I didn't know everything. And on that, with them, I traveled up into Africa, to various places in Africa with NUSAS. And I met Ian Smith in Rhodesia and Kaunda in Zambia and places like that. But I did see in other places that I went to that apartheid was everywhere. In the Congo, it was everywhere. It wasn't just in South Africa. There was separation, segregations of different kinds in all countries as you went up into Africa, you know. So, and then again, one also realizes that what South Africa had as separate or segregation was the same thing that the Dutch practiced in Holland up to 1920. So up to 1920, no person of color was allowed into Holland. Mm-hmm. up to 1920. Holland did not admit anyone of color. So these European states, countries, England being probably the foremost, laid down these kind of conditions in all the territories that they had. That would be India and wherever it was.
Where you wouldn't basically mix with the subjects.
The British laid down those rules. They laid down those rules. And those rules were also followed in America. So America had the same.
Do you believe those are oppressive and problematic laws?
Well, I don't know why they did it, but they did it. And as a youngster, you just said, oh, because that's how it is. And you were sort of told that, to be quite frank, these other races are not clean. And therefore, you have to do this. That you can't have them coming into restaurants. You can't have them going into theaters and things like that. That's the way life was. So things have changed a lot. As I got older, I became more anti-apartheid, because it started to interfere with what I was trying to do as a consulting engineer, and trades that we wanted to hire. Job reservation was not something we abided by. We were not prepared to abide by job reservation because it was ruining construction. Job reservation was the same as BEE now.
Yes.
So the blacks have got BEE now, then we had job reservation. So it's just the other way around, something like that, which made life extremely complicated and difficult and expensive.
For our viewers and listeners, explain what that is. Is an allocation of jobs for a particular group, race of people? Is that what it is? A quota,
yes.
a
Job
quota
reservation
system?
meant that only certain skilled jobs were reserved for white people.
Okay.
And that made it difficult for us because a lot of the time there weren't any skilled white people, but there were skilled black people that you could use who had somehow moved on to those trades like plastering and bricklaying and things like that. And now you have BEE, which is something in the other direction, something like that, which also hamstrings any new business in South Africa. And so we have now the reverse. And it's having a worse effect, I'd say, on South Africa than what job reservation did. Mainly we just ignored job reservation. So we would get fines, and then we would appear in the industrial court, and then I would say we couldn't find painters for this job. There were none available. And then they would give us a warning, and so we would go on,
So based on what you've said, was your issue with apartheid more to do with the convenience of your trade and your business, or did you ever feel uncomfortable with the segregation?
Well, at that time, we didn't have unemployment. Everybody was employed. There was very, very, it was unheard of. I was going to say there was very little unemployment. There was no unemployment.
You're saying across the board?
Across the board. Everybody was employed. So there was you didn't have anybody running around marching up and down in the streets or anything like that. Everybody had a job. And as it happens, people, in any case, drift back to their own group, be they Greeks, Italians, English, or whatever. They don't desperately want to all mix together in the street all day, every day. So it didn't really cause much of a problem for me. I do remember when I was about 22, befriending a senior young policeman, and he was telling me about problems they had with the shebeens in the black areas doing astronomical amounts of business. These were black operated liquor outlets that were causing tremendous difficulty for the police because they were sort of cheating the black community, these shebeens, you know what I mean? That I remember, a little bit of that. But basically, there was nobody, South Africa had already started employing in businesses graduates who were black or Indians or coloreds for that matter. It was already far established that you could work for a company if you were qualified. So it wasn't, apartheid was not applied rigorously, certainly in any way, in the private sector. It was very loosely, if anything, applied in the private sector. But obviously, we as a white community started to hear from groups that they're not happy, they want to run the country. They want to run the country. They want to be in charge of the country, you know. And so obviously we heard all about that. I, as time went by, went with the group that wanted to do away with apartheid because it just seemed like an awkward policy to have. And when I was a city councillor, one of the first things I did as a city councillor, the city I was in had very beautiful parks, some of the most beautiful parks in the world. Not as beautiful as they have in Europe maybe, but for Africa, not bad. And these parks were cared for, you know, with tenderly cared for. And but they were open from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening, but only to white people. So in the council, I proposed that the parks should be open to all races. So the council agreed to open one park, Princess Park in Pretoria, to all races. And it wasn't 3 months that the Director General of, I'm not sure what you call that division, the Parks Division or something like that, the Parks Division, yeah. He appealed in the council to show us what was happening in the park. You know, plants were disappearing, areas that where you were supposed to not walk on had been walked away, destroyed, and the rubbish was just unbelievable to see that was being thrown into the park. So the result was the council closed the park to everyone until it could be refurbished. The park was closed for about 2 years so that nobody could use it. So that was an example of the sort of thing. However, be that as it may, I still stood for Parliament twice for the party that was opposed to apartheid.
And was that, if I'm correct,
Pardon?
The Progressive Federal Party?
They were first called the Progressive Party.
Okay.
And they were in 74, I stood for them. And then in 81, I stood for them, by which time their name had changed to the Progressive Federal Party. Yeah, and I stood for them in Pretoria. And I was spat on, I was screamed at, I had things thrown at me, I was threatened. I was threatened with death. Phone calls came in threatening us with death. But these weren't just flippant calls. They called so much that I contacted the police, and the police traced the calls. Now, at the time, I thought you could trace it immediately. But the police explained to me it's not so easy. And so it took maybe 10 days of calls before, because they would call every night at 2 o'clock in the morning. We're going to kill you, we're going to kill you, we're going to kill your children, we're going to kill your wife, you know, and so on. And I kept these people at bay by saying, please, I've got 250,000 rands, which at the time was $250,000, which today would be a huge amount of money. You can have it if you just leave us alone. So we sort of devolved from being threatened to how are we going to give them the 250,000, where are we going to drop it. But that kept them on the line. So the police, one night they called at 2 o'clock in the morning giving us instructions for the 250,000. And I put on the phone, and shortly afterwards, an hour or two later, the police called to say, we've got them, we've arrested them, we found where they were calling from. There are 3 of them. They're in the cells in the centre of Pretoria at the moment. I must come into town and we have to deal with it.
But they're Afrikaans.
Yes, they're Afrikaans. Yeah.
Now look, we can pretty much sit here for hours and talk about apartheid. But you mentioned threats made to your wife and your kids at the times, which kind of leads us into, I guess, from apartheid to your marriage. How did you meet Maye Haldeman, Elon's mother?
Oh, Maye, when I came back to South Africa at the age of 12, I went into Standard 5 halfway through, which is grade 7, halfway through. And because the year in England is from June to June, and the year here is from January to December. So when I left England, I'd sort of ended grade 7, and then I got here, and then I had to continue grade 7 for another 6 months. I came first in the class, though, immediately, and I'm proud of that. And Maye was a little girl in grade 5. She was 10.
She was 2
and I
years...
saw her running about a few times.
Okay.
And I couldn't help not noticing her. And I then went on to the nearest high school. It's a very high quality high school that we went to. And she came to the same school. And so right through school, I saw her off and on. I took her friends out occasionally as I got older. And I never took her out until I'd already left school. And she was still at school. And so I started taking her out when she was starting her final year at school.
When was your first date? How old were you? Your first date, you and Maye?
First date, we went to see African Queen, the movie, The African Queen. It was the first date I had with Maye.
And when did you express interest in pursuing her?
Pursuing her?
Yeah, like...
Oh, we fell for each other immediately. I mean, we went out for 6 years then, off and on. So it's quite a difficult thing to do, because you have a lot of things pushing you from all sides. But we managed to keep on for 6 years. We had some heavy breaks over family issues, but eventually we married, and we were together day and night for 24/7 for 10 years. And then she said she wanted to be divorced.
Now, one of the clips that went viral on X, I forgot who it was that interviewed you, but you said that her family or her parents or grandparents were Nazis.
Well, her father was a provincial head of the Canadian version of the National Socialist Party.
So like Canadian Nazis?
Yes, Canadian. So it's easy to understand. In England, there was a National Socialist Party as well. Oswald Mosley
Was part of that, yeah.
Yes, he ran the English version of the National Socialists. And in free countries, you can do that. You can't break the law or anything, but you can have a party like that. And in Canada, Maye's father was, as I understand it, provincial head or one of the leaders in Saskatchewan of this particular party that was sympathetic to Germany and didn't want Canada to enter the war against Germany and all that sort of stuff. And, and then after the war, what happened to him there, I don't really know. I know that shortly after the war, he immigrated to South Africa because South Africa was a place where it became apparent before 1948 already that South Africa was going to go fully Afrikaner nationalist. And Afrikaner nationalists were 100% behind the Germans in the war. That's one of the problems my father had, because he went to the war on the British side, but when he came back to South Africa, came back to South Africa run by the Afrikaans nationalists.
Who were pro-Nazis.
Yes, so he couldn't get a job because his record as having served 6 years in the war precluded him from getting employment. You follow what I mean?
Yeah.
So he would try at the railways and they would turn him down. He would try at the steel company, they'd turn him down, and so on. So that was the situation. And he didn't have any formal education because he lost any attempt to get formal education because he left the country at 19 in the military. So South Africa in the 40s, during the war, the first three prime ministers of South Africa, that was Dr. Malone, Stradum, and John Vorster. They were all interned for 6 years. In other words, jailed for 6 years during the Second World War. And after the war, many Germans came here and were given refuge and new identities and so forth.
And Maye's father was one of them?
He came from Canada.
But it was that environment.
Because he was also under investigation. So after the war, they started investigating. You see, it's fair enough to say that Maye's father would not have known what the Germans were actually doing in Germany. It's fair enough to say that the Germans, as far as he was concerned, were not doing anything bad, because how would he know? But at any rate, so after the war, when things came out about what had happened in Germany, he realized he's got a problem, and they started investigating people like him in Canada. So he decided the best for him is to leave. So it's very unusual. He's actually from Minnesota. He's an American. He lived in Canada, but he's an American. It's very unusual for Americans to immigrate to South Africa. So he immigrated to South Africa in 1948 with the takeover of the government by the National Party. He was fully in favor of apartheid. He was fully in favor of that. He believed firmly that the Jews are the problem in the world. And
did Maye have any of these views?
Sorry?
Did Maye have any of these views?
No, Maye was totally unpolitical. Totally unpolitical. The most unpolitical person you could ever imagine, So, no, not at all.
So you fell for Maye at a pretty young age.
We had arguments, though. You see, so when I was taking Maye out, they would very high-handedly, Maye's mother and father, very high-handedly, looking down at me, tell me how things are. They would say, I had a lot of Jewish friends. Then they would say to me, the Jews are the problem. And I'd say, wait a minute, I got a lot of Jewish friends, don't give me this, 'cause I got some terrific Jewish friends. And then they would say to me, they hammered apartheid. And I, at that stage, when I was about third, fourth year university, I started arguing with them. And then that resulted in them saying, I'm not welcome there anymore, because their high-handedness, their superiority attitude was nauseating to me, And so I said, well, in that case, I'm leaving, and I broke up with Maye. Maye was a sort of, I wouldn't say chubby, but she was full. She was full, It was a very pretty girl, but she was full. But after I left her on that occasion, she cried for 3 weeks, I was told. Cried for 3 weeks, never ate anything. And she slimmed down tremendously and promptly people entered her in a beauty competition, and she won the provincial beauty title.
As a result of heartbreak?
Eh?
As a result of heartbreak?
As a result of losing weight.
Oh.
And so that started her on a life of modeling and beauty and all that sort of stuff, So she won this competition after losing weight and crying for 3 weeks. But we as a result of that, we were broken up for about 15 months, but then we got back together, and within 3 months of getting back together, we told the parents, look, we're getting married, that's it. And we got married.
And you got married and you had 3 kids, and one of them is one of the most wealthiest men in the world and one of the most influential men in the world. Tell us a little bit about Elon Musk.
Well, Elon was born 9 months and 2 days after the wedding.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty interesting.
Pretty,
yeah. And, Elon is a very, my boys, all of them, perfectly good children. What you dream of having, really, trouble-free, very obedient.
Not rebellious?
Smarter than you. Eh?
Okay. Were they rebellious?
No, not at all.
Okay.
And, no, they were too clever to be rebellious. They would explain to you where you are wrong.
Oh, okay.
You see? So if you had an idea, they didn't bother to be rebellious. They would simply explain to me or Maye how we happen to be wrong in the matter. So they were very smart, you see, very smart kids.
And was Elon entrepreneurial from a young age?
Yes, well, they took a great interest in scientific things. Obviously I did. And so they were very into anything new. It was an interesting period of time. I'd grown up with the first atomic bomb had gone off, and then there was the Sputnik, and then the satellites were going up, and I worked for the American Moon Watch, and this was going on all through all that time, this continual progress, And I actually got 2 diplomas in computer programming with IBM in 1969, Fortran and COBOL, where you use punch cards, and it's a big IBM 360 and all that sort of stuff. And so I knew about computers, but to me a computer, from the way we had used it, it was a tool of sorts. But I didn't see the future for computers the way Elon did. So when Elon was about 11, by the time he was 11, he'd had all the little computers that had come out, toy computers, VIC Commodore, VIC 20,
Commodore 64.
Atari.
Okay, Atari. These are old school. We're talking about 80s.
These things had come out. And he'd had all of these. And then one day he came to me when he was 11 years old, 1982, and he said to me, showed me an advert in a newspaper, big advert in a Sunday newspaper, advertising a 6-month course to introduce the new IBM XTA computer. PC. It was called a PC. Nobody heard of a PC before. PC meaning personal computer. And it would have a mouse, a keyboard, a screen, and a printer, and some other things. And he wanted to go on this course. The course was $1,500 at the time, the equivalent of $1,500, which was a huge amount of money. So I phoned them and they said, no, we're not taking any children. Well, that was a relief for me, so I told him they're not taking children. So he was very unhappy. And a week or so later, he came to me with another advert, which they were now advertising that they would do an introductory lecture for 75 rands, 2-hour introductory lecture for 75 rands, you see? So, which is much more affordable. So I phoned them again and pleaded with them, and eventually they agreed that he could come as long as he was properly dressed. So I took him to the event at Wits University. I'd been to Wits. I knew where to take him. He went in, and lots of people went in. Kimball and I waited outside because the boys were living with me by that time. The boys were living with me by that time. And when all the people came out, no Elon came out. And so I went inside and I went to this big lecture hall that goes down, and looked down, and right at the bottom there was Elon talking to little Elon standing there. His jacket was off, his sleeves were rolled up, his tie was gone, and his white sleeves were up. And he was in discussion with tall men all around him, you see. So I went down, and I'd hardly reached him when the one tall chap, one of these British blokes who'd come out from England to do this, turned to me, very professor sort of guy, spectacles, little beard. He said to me, "This boy must get one of these computers." You see? And my first reaction was, how much is it, you know? And And I was at that point working for the retailer that had actually sponsored that event. So the retailer's CEO was there, and he was also from England, and he said, "Don't worry, Errol, we'll give you a discount." So as it happened, we then bought this thing. Probably the best purchase I ever made in my life. With that PC, Elon taught himself to be a first-rate programmer. Within a year or so, he was a year and a half, he must have been a top-of-the-notch programmer, which didn't even exist in the world at that time. So few people were at that level. And about a year or so after, he even did a program that I sent to a magazine. It's a game that you could program your computer with, and it was DOS. It wasn't Windows. It was disk operating system. So it was very different to what people think of now. And you could program your computer to play this game where you shoot aircraft on the screen and stuff. Anyway, he was paid for that. He got about $700 for that. Anyway, a little while later, he came to me, quite interestingly, I think it's an interesting point. He came to me with a grey box one day, and a couple of years later, and he said, "Look," and it was a grey box, metal box with a red light on the top and some wires coming out of it. He said, "You know what this is?" I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's a modem. It's a modem." I said, "What's a modem?" He said, "Well, with this thing, I plug this cord into our telephone lines, and I can communicate with the computer at Oxford University on my computer."
What age was Elon? What period are we talking here?
He would have been about 12.
Oh, 12?
Yes.
He's doing this at 12?
Sorry?
He's doing all of this at 12?
Yes.
Wow, impressive.
Yes, I bought him the computer when he was 11.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, "With this, I can communicate with the computers at Oxford University." My first question is, well, I hope we're not paying for that. No, he said, it goes over the lines. It's superimposed on the lines, he told me. You don't pay for it. And
would you say you were quite tight with money, or were you quite free-handed?
no, we were reasonably well-off people. I mean, we always had a twin-engine aircraft. We had our own bush farm, our own airstrips. I had my own ocean-going yacht at the time. I owned several houses in the city.
But you seem like you're quite conscious of what's being spent.
But the reason why people with money have got money is they don't waste money.
Okay, fair enough.
Waste money. But anyway, the computer cost about $1,200 less than a new Mercedes-Benz.
Okay.
So a new Mercedes-Benz at the time was $9,000. Mm-hmm. That's the small one, the 220 or something like that. The computer cost $7,800.
Wow.
And I got $400 discount. So I paid $7,400.
Okay.
It's a lot of money to buy for an 11-year-old,
That's true. I think we forget that for an 11-year-old.
These days it's a little different. I have a young son of 8. He turns 8 today. 2 years ago, I think, or at least a year and a half ago, I bought him an iPad. Okay. Because he was quite ready for it, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And things have changed, But in those days, it was all pencil and paper and stuff like that. I did all my studies through university doing all calculations on a slide rule.
Wow. Would you say you played any role in where Elon is now today?
Yes, I'd say he's in the position he is today largely because of me.
How?
Well, I was his father, and genetically he's the same as me, and he inherited my sort of science side. When I completed math at school, in the final year, I answered all the questions. You only have to answer 5 of the 6 questions in the 2 papers. So I answered all 12 questions on both papers. And the department contacted me and said I received 120% for math, which was quite unusual. You see, so obviously I must have been quite good at math.
So you're saying he got that from you, did he?
Sorry?
Do you say he got that from you? Elon
I imagine, my father was was doing
cyber security
work. He could do it across, So anyway, he got that. He must have got that from me, obviously. And then the way I raised them and tried to give them as much exposure as possible. By the time they were 12, 13, 14, they'd been to most major cities in the world.
Brothers and sisters and friends, I see that you're enjoying the content. How come you've not clicked subscribe to the Five Pillars YouTube channel? And if you're watching via Rumble, how come you've not subscribed on our Rumble channel? If you like the content, you like the guests, you like what we're talking about, it's absolutely inexcusable and cheeky for you not to click subscribe. Thank you and Jazakallah khair. Are you hurt or offended or feel any way about perhaps not being given the credit or acknowledgement that you deserve?
Oh, no, I get the credit all the time.
But some have said that perhaps you take more credit than you deserve.
No, I've never seen that.
No?
No.
Has Elon publicly acknowledged that?
Well, when I was at a launch of the Starship 12 months ago at Boca Chica, he invited me to come over to a launch with him, and very successful launch. And this Starship is like 44 levels of a building high, and it's quite something to see. Anyway, after the launch, we had a SpaceX party of about 250 people. And Elon really, when he learned from Maye and I, he knows how to throw a good do,
Yeah.
And everybody's having a great time, and about 250 people and lights, and it was a Hawaiian sort of themed evening. And then Elon stopped the proceedings. I was sitting with Elon in the main sort of enclosure sort of thing with all the people around. And then Elon stopped the proceedings and he said, everyone, this is my dad. He's a bit taller than me, or I've become shorter. He put his arm, I was here, put his arm around. He said, this is my dad. I learned everything I know about engineering from him.
And that was a year ago?
Yes. And I said to the crowd, no, he taught himself a lot as well. But that's what he said. I learned everything I know about engineering from my dad.
Has your relationship with Elon ever been fractious?
Fractured?
Fractured or...
Well, no, it's always been very good. What happened was, in the early 2000s, Elon wanted us to come and live in America. That is my second wife and our children.
Heidi.
Yes. And we've got two daughters, Alexandra and Rose, and she had 3 children. So Elon and Kimball wanted us to, they'd done well. They were sitting on hundreds of millions at the time. They wanted us to come and live in America. Mm-hmm. So we went to America and we went to live there. But my Afrikaans wife, South African Dutch wife, she didn't like America. I also found it quite difficult. Americans are workaholics. Elon had a sign in the business, if you don't come in on Saturday, don't bother to come in on Sunday because you're fired. They work weekends. They go to work at 6 in the morning, they come home at 10 at night. And we bought a beautiful home in Beverly Hills. We had everything. But my Afrikaans wife just couldn't take it. All she was doing was taking the children to school. First to 90210 Beverly Hills High School, and so on. And then later we tried moving to Malibu on a plot, on a 2-acre piece of land. And we just couldn't come right. The Americans are not, Afrikaans people are a lot like the English people. They get on well with English people, actually. And English people, I'm talking about people from England. And Afrikaans people aren't far apart. But the people in America speak English, but they ain't English. They are definitely not English. I don't know if you know that.
I get what you mean. Was it the work element, the work drive, and the excess in that?
They're not English. They don't visit, and the topics you discuss and the things you do are not the same. It's a subject all on its own. But let me assure you, Americans speak English, but that's where it ends. They are not English.
They're your cousins, though, aren't they?
Well, you can acclimatize to them.
Yeah.
You can acclimatize to them, as many people have done, but they are not English. Simple as that. And they are not Afrikaans. They're not English. They have very little time for small talk. Everything. I don't want to make a big judgment on them now, but what they do is heavily motivated by what is in it for them in terms of income. The English, on the other hand, are people who have a lot of spare time, which they waste, in my opinion. Therefore, they don't earn the money they need. Therefore, it's my experience that the majority of people in England are miserable because they envy people with money. They're the most envious people I've ever come across. They envy anyone who's got money in England. In America, no one if you've got money, people worship you. People love you. They think you're the greatest. And an American will tell you, I am the best in this town. I am the best interviewer. I do the best podcasts. Anyone else you did a podcast with was a waste of your time. I am the best. You know what I mean? Whereas in England, they wouldn't do that. They'd say, I'm thinking one day to become a podcaster and maybe I'll make some money. They don't do it, and then they don't have any money, and then they envy the people who do it. You know, it's a whole subject on its own.
So how long did you and Heidi stay in America?
Well, we stayed there off and on 2002, 2003, into 2004.
And when you left, did that upset Elon?
Yes. Well, that was the thing. We decided we're going to leave. Mm-hmm. We got together as a family. I was sort of putting up with it because I had my sons there, and I was going away for a week at a time, and I was going to work at 6 in the morning, coming home at 10 at night. My wife said if this goes on, she's going to kill herself. She's going to commit suicide. So she did. She attempted to kill herself. So that cost us $20,000 in hospital treatment to save her. Mm-hmm. Okay? So it wasn't funny. Anyway, we got together as a family and we decided we're going to leave. But in the meantime, Elon's office had our passports. So we went to the the embassy of South Africa, and we told them we lost our passports. And so we got temporary passports to return to South Africa. And so we narrowly escaped. They heard about our attempt and they raced to the airport to stop us, but we got on the plane before they could stop us, and we came back to South Africa. And Elon and Kimball said they will never talk to us again. We are done. As far as they are concerned, we don't exist anymore. We will never talk to you again. And I said to Kimball, but isn't this a bit silly? And then Kimball said, well, Dad, talk to us in 10 years' time. 10 years from now, come back and talk to us, but not for 10 years.
And did that happen? 10 years? Did you have 10 years apart?
It did happen. Except for one thing. Shortly after that, the boys decided that Alexandra and Rose, who were their blood sisters, half sisters, should not be in South Africa. And would we not let them come and live with, as it happened, Kimball and his wife at the time, you know, who had a very big home in Colorado, very big home, 12-bedroom home.
Wow.
Would we not consider that Rose and Alexandra go back? And because from their point of view, Alexandra and Rose are subject to living inside rolls of barbed wire, inside electric fences, completely true. A machine gun on the front lawn, as they put it. We have to have a machine gun on the front lawn. Well, that wasn't the case, but they put it like that. And they don't want Alexandra and Rose to grow up under those conditions. And so we agreed. And so about 2.5 years after coming back, Alexandra and Rose left South Africa to go and live with their brothers.
So where does Jana fall into all of this?
Well, Jana is the daughter of my second wife. And when we came back to South Africa after being in America in 2004, I had really had the whole family thing up to here, you know. So I decided, we amicably divorced. I gave Haida everything I had, so, which was quite a lot. So she did pretty well out of it. And I took to my yacht and I started sailing. And so I sailed from Cape Town into the Med, and then, across to the Caribbean and various things, across to India a few times and so on. So I did that for quite a long time. And occasionally I would come back to South Africa to see the children. And one of the reasons I came back once was because of my two daughters who were with their mother. The request came for them to go back to America. So I came back for that. But then they were in America. So if I wanted to visit them after that, I went to America, the two daughters. So I never saw, Maheda remarried, you see. She remarried somebody. And as it happened, he died. He was killed in a car accident last year. But at any rate, she remarried. And I never saw anybody for the next 12 years or so. Never saw any of them,
None of your children?
Sorry?
You saw no one? No family members?
Well, I saw that my two daughters in America sometimes. I would go there and see them. But I never saw Jana for 12 years, maybe. And so in about 2015, somewhere there, Jana contacted me to say that she's very poor, struggling, and she lives with this boyfriend she's got, and he's a surfer. He doesn't work, and they take drugs, all that sort of stuff. I don't know. Anyway, and she's trying to clean herself up, and she can't go on like this. She doesn't know what to do. She's going to kill herself. So she wrote me. So I showed the letter to my son Kimball, because I was back on good terms with him by that time. And he said, leave her. It's not our family, leave her. So then I showed it to Rose, who was, in fact, Jana's half-sister. But she's the youngest one. She said, no, just leave her. You shouldn't help her. So a couple of days later, another letter came saying, if you don't help me, I'm going to kill myself. So I went to see her, and I found that she was living in a storeroom with this character, and of a disused shopping center. Terrible. I mean, it was just horrible. And this is a young girl. She was about 29 or something. And it's a fully grown woman, And so I immediately helped her with money for food, because she was as thin as a rake.
She was 29 at the time?
Yeah. She was as thin as a rake. And terribly thin, terribly. Her upper legs were like my arm, you might say. And so I started helping them with food money and toiletries for her, And immediately, I was on my way to America at that particular point, to go over and see the girls. But before I left, I bought her several thousands worth of new clothes, because she had to have clothes. And so I left her with money for the time that I would be away. And so for the next year or so, I kept on doing that. I never saw her much, because I'd send the money through the ATM. I don't know if you know how you do that. It's through the banking system.
Sure.
And anyway, at one point it seemed better, and then I also organized a second-hand car for her to use, and not an expensive car,
So this is for her and her surfer boyfriend?
No, for her.
Okay.
The idea was for her. Anyway, the person she's with is a bum. I mean, it's just the bottom of the barrel, Anyway, but what do you do, with a woman? Anyway, so at a point she contacted me to say that this fellow's thrown her out of the storeroom, and she's sitting in the street with all her clothes. So I said, well, have you got the vehicle? So she said, yes, she's got the vehicle. I said, well, put your things in the vehicle and come here. So Rose was living here then. Oh, by the way, Rose came back to South Africa to do her high schooling near her mother, who lives in the next town. So Rose had, in the meantime, come back. She'd finished primary schooling in America, and she came back here. So Rose was living with me in this house. and Rose was about 18 or so. And so Jana came and stayed here, and she stayed here for about a week or so, 10 days, and we got on very well. And we actually, got on well as a man and a woman. She's a fully grown woman. And, so we found we were very fond of each other, as a matter of fact. So, what do? So then this boyfriend started coming here, and then he would cry on the outside where you came in, howl at night, "Wah!" and the neighbors were wondering what's going on, So she said, all right, she's going to go and give him another turn, another chance. Anyway, so she left and off she went.
Well, by that time, they had some kind of romanticism already began between yourselves?
Yes, between me and Jana, yeah. Yeah, I'm a red-blooded guy,
What would you say to those? I mean, look, I don't want to spend too much time to pry on this, in all honesty, because I think there's other things we can talk about, but I think it's important to at least posit to you. What would you say to those who would say that the whole thing feels a bit weird, that this was ultimately...
Well, yes, I'd imagine it would. But there's no rule, there's no laws, there's no rules in love and war. I mean, you've got some of these movie stars there in the 80s going out with 23-year-olds at the moment. So, there's no rules for them.
From your 3 wives, who did you have the deepest love for?
That's a difficult question. You love them all the same, I'd say. The rules are not really written down. It's all fair in love and war. So she came back to me 2 months later to tell me that she's pregnant. And we sat out there and she said, I'm pregnant. So my immediate thought, well, surely it's not me. She said, no, it is you, because I have gone back to him, but I don't... I live with him, I help him, I feel sorry for him, but we don't do anything. I'm just, that's the situation. It's difficult to believe a woman when they say that. But anyway, that's what she said. So I then took blood samples, and I found that if I send blood samples cryogenically to Canada, that means you keep it frozen all the way, then they can tell me from Canada before the child is born. So I sent this stuff off, and they replied from Canada. Took some time. By the time they got back, she was 4.5 months pregnant. And they said, yeah, it's 100% or 99.9% is my child, And so, that's settled. So, I mean, we had thought, I would not have agreed with that. The thought had occurred to us, abortion and all that sort of stuff. But she said there's no way she wants an abortion, So I said, well, I don't want an abortion either. No way. And so he was born, and he turned out to be probably the finest young boy I've ever known. And certainly one of the finest young boys I've ever known. And certainly among my 3 boys now, at his age, he's far more with it and developed than Elon and Kimball were at that age. He's far smarter, he's far quicker, but that could be because of the times in which we live, because of computers and all that sort of stuff. He's 7 years old, he's 8 today. For a year, he's been completely computer literate. So he's better on a computer than you are, I guarantee, and certainly me. He's so quick on picking up using, he's got a gaming computer that I bought him because he's classed as a gamer. He was invited by PUD or something like that in China. They are the big game manufacturers. They invited him to China because he competes against men in their 20s. And they said, if we can get him to China, PUG, they'll make him famous in China. But he's so small, it's so hard to take him to China, Anyway, we said, well, think about it. But, so he's got a 30,000 Rand or 1,500 or what would you call it, 3,000 pound gaming computer. The real thing. And, so it's turned out quite nice. And then we had a little girl after that.
How's Jana's relationship with her mother since this?
Very good. The mother's, the mother was married. She then got divorced, married another man. She has her own love affairs, if you understand what I mean. Mm-hmm. She's not sitting there monitoring everybody else's love affairs.
Did she find it weird at all, or was she okay with it?
No, well, it's not weird. For a start, it's a woman who have no relation to me.
By blood.
Weird would be something incestual or something. It's not weird.
I think, look, I'm just positing to you, and I don't want to stick on this too much. Is that this was someone who was your stepdaughter at one point?
Yes, she was my stepdaughter for a very, very short time.
How long?
2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Since then she had about 5 or 6 other stepfathers, So I've got cases which they say in the Bible is what you should do, of men marrying their brother's widow, sort of thing. I find that pretty odd as well. I mean, it's kind of creepy, but on the other hand, I mean, there's nothing creepy about the situation with me and Jana. She's a fully grown woman. She's now 37. I mean, she's approaching middle age.
Are you still together?
Pardon?
Are you still together?
Well, she was here, living here until 3 weeks ago, but she spoke to me about getting a little house near the school, so that the kids can walk to school every day, because the distance from here to the school it's a long trip every day, and back and forward, because afternoons and everything. So we've rented a small place next to the school, and it's pretty safe there, and the kids can walk to school, and there's good security there and everything. And so that's been what we've been doing for the last 3 weeks, and giving it a try. I'm not enjoying it very much, but on the other hand, it's much easier for her,
Bringing the interview to a close, we've spoken about your family, your background, apartheid, business ventures, Elon, your various marriages. You turn 79 tomorrow at the time of filming, and then I've got you
turn 79 tomorrow.
79. I've got you some nice gifts
here. Thank you so much.
And how often do you think about death?
About every day. No. I mean, obviously, I think when you get older, I suppose you do start thinking about,
Are you a Christian, man?
Yes, I believe I'm a Christian. I believe in the Christian teachings.
Do you believe in a day of judgment and hellfire and paradise?
No, I believe in the Christian teachings.
Okay.
I believe in the Christian teachings. Do unto others as you would do unto yourself. And, I believe in the Christian teachings, the simple Christian teachings.
What do you think happens after we die? Do you think there is a hereafter?
To be honest, I have no idea. Okay. No idea.
So you say that you kind of loosely believe in the Christian teachings as opposed to the doctrine of like hereafter, judgment day, eternal accountability.
There are how many? I don't know how many. There's 500 different religions in the world, and they all have different ideas. So some of the ideas are okay. Some of the ideas I don't know. I mean, we are little mites on a dust speck in a space. That's what we are. In the universe, and we trying to pretend we know all about the universe and everything. Well, I don't think we do. So I think we just really, it's silly to talk along those lines. It's silly to say I think this is going to happen or that's going to happen. It's just silly.
Do you ever ask yourself, as you said, you think about death every day? Do you ever wonder to yourself, like a more kind of greater purpose to life? How did we get here? Where are we going?
Yes. Of course, we think about that all the time. That's one of the things when my children were with me, Elon and Kimmel especially, they grew up with me until they finished school. We talk about that sort of thing. Who are we? Where did we come from? Why are we here? What's the point? We are told by the scientists that within a certain period of time, the earth will be swallowed up in the sun, and everything will be forgotten.
Do you believe in God?
Yes, I do believe in God.
Do you believe there's one God or many gods?
No, I believe in God. I just believe in God.
Have you ever looked into Islam? What type of exposure have you had to Islam?
Islam,
yeah.
Well, yes, I've got so many Muslim friends now that before I had Muslim friends, my closest knowledge of Muslims was the mosque in the center of Pretoria, which we wanted to demolish to put up a shopping center, and
dear.
they wouldn't allow it. So we had to build the shopping center around the mosque, And so I remember going to the mosque and and you had to take your shoes off, and all that sort of thing. And I like that. And then beyond that, the mullah or the
Imam,
chief
Imam.
the imam,
Yeah.
at that mosque when I was very young, he called me aside and he said, which is sounds sort of creepy, I suppose, or not. I hope not. Doesn't sound creepy. But he started talking to me and he said to me, "I see great things in your life." That's what he said to me.
Okay.
Very great things. So I said, "Thanks. Well, thank you." He said, "No, I see very great things in your life." And yeah.
Well, I invite you to, when you have time, to look into
I'd
Islam.
like to finish and say that since then I've met many Muslims, and my experience, especially in the Emirates and so on, is very refined people, extremely refined. More refined than Europeans, if you know what I mean.
Elaborate.
And the woman, very, very refined. There's no sign of lack of refinement. And, that's something that's very important. They're very, very refined people.
Well, look, I invite you to explore further.
Okay.
If time permits, I think, where do we come from? Where are we going? Purpose to life. All of these things. Can something come from nothing? And I think these are things are healthy to look into.
Yes.
And since you're making lots of visitations to the UAE, where there is an overt expression of Islam in some spaces, I would certainly invite you to look further. And I've included a copy of the Quran.
I see that. Thanks.
Yeah, so please do, amongst other nice smelling things.
Before you go into a business venture, you do your homework, right? You do it on an elaborate way, right? So the thing is, if life can end at any moment, to have clear and concrete proof of something, you need to do investigation. So for you to rule out, for you to accept the Bible as the word of God, and then you find maybe there's contradictions, or you find maybe in another book, another revelation, claimed revelation, that there's contradictions. You have to think about those things, and then you have to look at the system that has the least contradictions, the prophets that have a lot of things going for them, and you have to look at what they came with, and you have to give it a proper evaluation without just disregarding it just because of the media, bad rapport you get on the media and this type of thing. It's very important. Yeah. So in terms of the beliefs of the Muslim, there are 6 articles of faith. Number 1 is to believe that there's one God, one creator, the God that has always been there. He's always been the creator. He was always one. He has no partners. He has no helpers, but he creates, and he created angels to do certain things, but he's not in need of them. So God is independent of everything, and everything is dependent upon him. If God were to sleep, there'd be no creation. So God doesn't sleep. He's independent of everything. So the first belief is to believe in one God. The second belief is to believe in his angels. And the main angel is the angel of revelation. And why is he the main angel? Because he brings the speech of God to mankind. Yeah. And that speech of God was given to Jesus, upon whom be peace. It was given to Moses. And then the third one is the revelation, which follows after the angels, the revelation. And then the prophets. To believe in all the prophets. So we can't pick and choose. I believe in David, but not Jesus. You're a disbeliever. I believe in Jesus, but I don't believe in Solomon. You're a disbeliever. You have to believe in all the prophets for the simple reason that they have the same beliefs about God. And they were commissioned by God. And the fifth one is the day of judgment, the day of accountability. Every single prophet that has come has warned his people about the day of justice. So we can get away with things in this world, but there will be accountability. And this is like logically sense that there's a day of judgment. And the final one is to believe in destiny, that everything happens by the will of God, good or bad. That's in a nutshell Islam. Everything else is just beauty.
No, I don't disagree with any of that stuff.
So would you like to formally embrace Islam?
What Jewish influences have you had in your life?
Well, I've had a lot of Jewish friends from school and university, and in business. I've worked a lot with Jewish people.
Were they all Zionists and pro-Israel?
No. Well, no. I would say, I suppose they're very pro. I mean, I imagine they're pro-Israel. They were more pro-South African. The ones that I knew, most of them are still here, and they were very much South Africans. I know that they sympathize with Israel and all that sort of stuff, but they never threw their religion or anything down my throat or anything like that ever.
The years that you've lived, the 79 years that you've lived, is there anything particularly that you look back at and think, I could have done this better, I should have done this better, regrets? Does anything stand out?
Maye and I should never have got divorced. That was a mistake. But because we got divorced, I was able to go on and have more children with more even possibly more interesting mothers that I can't imagine the world without today. Can't imagine the world without them. And but if I had known what I know, let's say now, when Maye and I got divorced, I was 33 years of age, 34 I think. I realized I was taking her for granted and all that sort of thing, and she'd been number two to me all the time, and she needed, I would have worked on that rather. That's something I regret. On the other hand, I won't go back because what I have since is worth a great deal.
And so that's interesting. It's interesting that we kind of started the conversation about Maye and we're kind of ending the conversation about Maye.
Yes.
Do you still have feelings for her?
Oh, no, well, you don't
not romantic, but feelings of
I care about her. I'm concerned about that she's okay, and all that sort of stuff. I do, obviously, and also for Hader, So they're very important to me, obviously. They're mothers of my children.
Are you in communication with them both or either?
Yes, not much. The occasional greeting,
Okay.
and then with Hader every day.
Okay.
So Hader phones me every day.
Okay.
She phoned me today already, and yesterday. So she lives in the next town.
Okay.
So she contacts me all the time. And, so that's quite nice.
You're coming to the UK soon, right?
I leave for the UK on Monday.
And what are you getting up to in the UK? Anything interesting?
Well, I'm supposed to speak at Oxford University.
Nice.
There's a motion put forward at Oxford University that all white people must leave Africa.
Okay.
Which is, Who
are you going up against? Malima?
I've no idea. But, I think they left off the last two words. I would have added to starve.
To starve?
Well, all white people must leave Africa to starve. Because without white expertise and the farms and the intensive farming that whites undertake, there would be no food here. They don't produce, they don't farm. So in places where the whites have gone, like Zimbabwe, the people are starving. And in the outskirts of Zambia, apart from the capital, the people in the rural areas have eaten everything. There's nothing, no snakes, no insects, no birds. Everything has been eaten. The only thing they can't, this is my own personal experience, the only thing that's living there are crocodiles, elephant and hippo, because they can't kill them. But they've eaten everything else. And they're starving. They're starving. They get maize sent to them from America, you know, which the government sells to the people in the rural areas. It's a very bad situation because there's no intensive farming. On the other hand, the HH, the president of Zambia, who I met, he's quite an enlightened president now, and he started inviting South African farmers to come to Zambia, and he gives them 100-year tenure on farms. In other words, the farm is theirs for 100 years. And if they will come and farm in Zambia. And a lot of them have gone. So farming has started up around Lusaka, intensive farming, for the first time. Do you realize Zimbabwe is a wasteland?
I mean, I heard the situation is very bad, yes.
The people there are being treated worse than the worst slaves were ever treated in the history of the world. They're not allowed to grow anything. If they grow anything, the police come and beat it down. They're only allowed to take money out of South Africa. This town is filled with Zimbabweans who work for the white people here, send their money home. They pay 20% commission to turn it into US dollars, which is crazy. And then they have to use that money to buy at the government's shops that are there. They're not allowed to grow vegetables. They're not allowed to build anything. And if they complain, they get whipped. And if they complain too much, the Zimbabweans here tell me that person gets taken away, he's never seen again.
Any final comments or responses to some of your critics that say, look, this is all kind of white supremacy and racism, all kind of glossed up and sugar-coated in language and jargon to do with X, Y, and Z. Look, you're going to be going to Oxford University, that's a motion. Just by the very fact that you're going to be presenting on one argument on one side and not the other, I'm sure there'll be those on the other side that will have all types of labels for you.
Well, you know, no, it's easy if you talk the truth and try to see the point from both point of views. If you try to see both point of views yourself, you know, I mean, if I take England for example, if I was an Englishman and I loved my country and I was living happily with all my people, and then suddenly a whole lot of strangers came in that I don't relate to, I would think, no, wait, this is not right. They must go back. It's the same thing.
But they're
Africa in England.
But they're being incentivized to come.
What?
They are being incentivized to come.
Nevertheless, we're being asked, so
There's
in the
a
past, white people were incentivized to come to Africa.
There's a labor shortage. There's wars.
Well, without looking for reasons and excuses, the white people came here for a reason, to work on the mines and all that sort of stuff. So just as if I were an English person and I'm proud of my country and the people that I've got there, and I'm inundated with people coming, colonizing me from another country,
Non-whites.
then it would be reasonable for me to say the same thing that they're talking about at Oxford. Why? They must all leave. So here we have another, the other sort of other way around. We have a sort of black continent where white people have come, and now the black people say the white people must go, or somebody's saying the white people must leave.
You know, you mentioned about Muslim migration to Britain and England, and you know, people need to go back. And
no, I don't say they need to go back.
or they.
I'm saying I might, if I were an Englishman,
Sure.
say, why are these people here?
Deport them, remigration. Let's say we deported every single legal and illegal migrant of Muslim or non-white descent back to where they come from. you're still left with a population of 4 million Muslims who have been there since post-World War II and are having more children than their white counterparts. White people are not having kids.
Yes.
So like, what do you do in that situation whereby they're not marrying, they're not having kids, it's an aging population, there's a labour shortage?
I would say the Muslim population is probably going to be the biggest population in due course.
Inshallah, inshallah. So I engage a lot of people from the right and I say to them, look, you can complain about migration, mass migration and all of that stuff. And you know what? Everyone wants safe borders. There's still issues at home amongst the white communities that you're not having kids.
Yes, it's a really serious problem.
You know, Elon talks about it a lot.
Yes.
He talks about it, about the global...
Because it costs too much to have a kid.
Okay.
It costs, because the white people see it in terms of, I've got to get this person through tertiary education.
Okay.
And that's too much.
But
do it.
But why are other communities doing it?
It puzzles me. It really puzzles me. I've spoken about this a lot. I never thought about that. When Elon was born, I lived in a small apartment. I never thought about whether I could take care of him or anything like that.
Yeah, so you kind of just trusted...
The attitude, it's selfishness. I don't know what the answer is. It's selfishness. But, yeah, it's selfishness, just plain selfishness.
I think the problem...
Yeah, that's true.
I think the problem with mass migration, if it can be described as such, is the reasons for mass migration, Errol. Why are people coming in large numbers? Why are they coming legally in large numbers? The highest number of migrants that have come to the UK in the last 3 years have been Indians.
Well, the countries they come from are dysfunctional.
I get that, but they're being incentivized to come. If you didn't want them, you close your borders, isn't it? If you don't want them, you close your borders. You don't incentivize it. You don't make the immigration process easier.
Strange. It's very strange. I mean, there's been riots and everything about it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know who's pulling the strings, and it's difficult to get into that. But obviously, people from very dysfunctional countries are coming to Europe and places that are not dysfunctional, supposedly not dysfunctional, and the fear is that Europe might become dysfunctional. You know.
The counter to that obviously would be that the people who are coming from dysfunctional countries, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, these are countries which were, I'm saying as a counter, these are countries that were made dysfunctional by the very countries that they're now coming to.
Well, every African country is dysfunctional, every single one. And South Africa is partially dysfunctional, but getting there. But we have still have a large white population. So speaking as an engineer, from a technical point of view, because we have a large white, colored and Indian population compared to the other African countries, you can actually judge our performance based on that.
Do you link functionality to white people?
I link it to white people. Yes, for sure. And Indians are also a big help, you know. And if the colored people are taken into account, they are also a help. So yes, I don't think there's any question about it. I don't think it's something to debate. If you show me a country and you tell me the population is totally black, then I want to know how they get. I want to ask a few questions about how they get by. Let's say Haiti or something like that. And then if you tell me this country's partially black, but a third of is black, but a third of their population is white people, then I can think of.
So you like the UAE?
I can think of a place like that, Saint Martin, in the Caribbean.
You like the UAE? You like the Saudi?
No. But I'm thinking black versus white, not Arab.
Okay.
And so if you take a place like St. Martin, which is about 1/3 white and 2/3 black, St. Martin is first world.
And you link that to the presence and the contributions of white people?
Yes, because of that. But if you go to Haiti, where the white population is more or less zero, it's not dysfunction. It's dysfunction.
Why do you think
like steroids?
Why do you think black people are dysfunctional, or why do you think they create societies which are dysfunctional? Why?
Well, you know, anybody could answer. It would appear they are not up to setting up countries and, departments and intensive farming. And, if you look at the population of South Africa, in 1910, the population of South Africa was 800,000 blacks and 400,000 white, colored, and Indian. Okay? In 2010, there were 55 million blacks. So the 800,000 became 55 million, okay, over that period. The whites, coloreds, and Indians went from 400,000 to 6 million. They just went like that, But the blacks went shoo. And that means that they proliferated. They proliferated under the situation that occurred in that 100 years to be able to increase their numbers so much. Rhodesia had 200,000 black people when the first whites went there. By 1980, when Rhodesia became independent, Zimbabwe, they had 8 million blacks. So they went from 200,000 in about 1890 to 8 million in 1980. Okay? Now, I would say what's left in Zimbabwe now is probably less than 1 million. Less than 1 million.
Do you think black people are good at anything?
They are pleasant people to work with, and they given work to do, they do it well and they do it thoroughly. I find them good workers. They tend to work well under white supervision. In the townships where they live, they throw trash everywhere, but they come here and clean like it's, with a fine tooth comb when they come to work here. But in the areas where they live, they don't worry about trash and stuff like that. So where they live is pretty awful, but that's just the way they see it. And
espousing that position or espousing that view, you don't think that's racist or supremacist?
No, it's fact. It's a fact. It's simply a fact. Simply a fact. I mean, it's not racist. It's a fact. So it's a fact. I mean, all the most rundown places in America, you can just point them out. They're all, where the black places, people are living in America.
Do you have black friends?
Yes, I have a few black friends.
Any successful black friends, I think financially?
Yeah, I've got a few. All want to. They're all trying to be, yeah. And they're very good workers. It's not their fault that their culture is not like the white culture. The white culture is to build and be strict and observe strict hours and get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to bed late at night and work weekends, and that's the white culture.
The white people haven't always been like that, have they?
Well, they certainly have in my life. So in Africa, they have African time. So everybody knows what African time means. African time means if somebody's coming to see you on Monday, they may come on Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
Or if they say they'll come on at 12 o'clock on Monday, they might come at 7 o'clock that night. It's called African time. So it's just their culture is different. When you say to them, but you said you'd be here, 10 o'clock this morning and it's now 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they say, oh, what's the difference? So there are differences. People have different cultures,
What would you say to those who okay, fine, we can talk about white functionality and European structure and statecrafting and building institutions and infrastructure and organization, all of that. But it is also a matter of fact, beyond any dispute, that it wasn't always necessarily like this. There were past black civilizations that were very functioning and, well organized. Sure, pre-modern times, right?
I don't know about them.
You don't know about them?
No.
So you believe the blacks...
Where were they?
This was before the period of colonialism.
Sorry?
Before the period of European colonialism,
There's nothing remaining of them. There's no remains.
Okay, but Europe wasn't always the way it was now.
Sure, everybody's growing, everybody's trying to improve. I'm not trying to
I'm just curious that
this one.
No,
group or
I get that. But I'm saying that Europeans or whites weren't always like the way we see them now. They weren't as well organized and functional as we see them now. Yes, sure, your lifetime, perhaps not been the case 400 years ago, 500 years ago.
Yes. Well, things go up and down. I mean, you had the, very fine period of time when the Persians were.
Like there were times during Islamic history and Islamic civilization.
Then you have the Roman Empire.
Yeah, you have the Islamic Empire when when Andalusia,
yes.
there wasn't any irrigation in Europe. You're burning women at the stakes as for witchcraft, and you had poor drainage. So I'm saying that civilizations have ups and downs.
Well, yes, I've written a book about that. Caliph Al-Mamun.
Al-Ma'mun, yes.
Of Baghdad.
The Abbasid Caliph.
He was a famous guy, and he used to pay for any manuscripts that had knowledge in their weight of gold, for their weight in gold. And he was the one who actually went with an army to the Giza Plateau, and he was the one who opened the pyramids. So the entrances that we have in the pyramids now were created in the year 820 actually.
During the Abbasid period. Yeah.
By Caliph Al-Mamun. And that's why we got, and he got in there and found nothing. I've got all his writings on my table over there. And so there was a period of time when civilization was in the hands of those people.
Arabs and Muslims. For nearly, I guess the point was, exactly, so this is the point, and I want the viewers to understand that, is that Errol Musk isn't saying that it's a permanent fixture.
No.
That things people rise and decline, and civilizations rise and decline, and there's just not a permanent assumption that one race or group or culture of people will dominate forever.
No. But what I am talking about is when people have different cultures, they don't easily assimilate. Even in this country, the English-speaking white South Africans are quite different to the Dutch-speaking white South Africans. Their cultures are miles apart. They eat different food. Everything. They do everything differently. So it's odd, but you can't say the one is better than the other,
But in some aspects that you can.
Huh?
In some aspects you can, like on specific things, because you were specific on them.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, of course.
Errol, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. It was a lengthy conversation.
Thank you.
And thoroughly enjoyed it.
Okay.
And we may even bump into each other in the UK.
Okay, it was a real pleasure meeting you.
Errol, thank you so much.
You're a real gentleman.
Brothers, sisters, friends, I hope you all thoroughly enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Do remember that you can find this episode on all 4 seasons on all the major audio platforms. And if you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be cheeky. Do remember to click subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.